Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy these new 20 Tinder stories we put together for you. As always, make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear and help support us. Because of your support, we're able to continue providing these great stories for you. Thank you. When my parents separated after over 2 decades of marriage, it was a difficult transition for our whole family. But I wanted to be supportive of my mom embracing this new phase because I knew after so many unhappy years she deserved to finally enjoy life again. She had spent her best years confined in an unfulfilling relationship, and now was her chance to rediscover freedom. As the divorce finalized, my mom was eager to start dating and see what was out there. I could tell the idea of meeting new people and going on adventures made her feel young again, like she was getting a fresh start. Though it had been decades since she was last single, she was ready to dive into the modern dating world. I helped her set up an online dating profile on Tinder, which seemed like an easy way for her to dip her toe in and start out slowly. We laughed hysterically at some of the matches the app suggested. I gave her tips to stay safe if she decided to meet anyone in person. I knew she was an adult and could make her own choices, but I also wanted to look out for her since this was all new territory. At first, my mom just chatted with a few different men on the app, sending me screenshots of their conversations to get my opinion. I could tell the attention and flattery was boosting her confidence that had taken a hit during her unhappy marriage. She seemed to be having fun just putting herself out there, without feeling pressured to rush into anything serious. One potential match immediately stood out to me as bad news, though. His profile pictures were all focused on showing off his muscles, cars, and what looked like expensive belongings. The interest he listed seemed immature, mostly related to partying and hooking up. His bio came across as cocky and aggressive, like he was on. When my parents separated after over 2 decades of marriage, it was a difficult transition for our whole family. But I wanted to be supportive of my mom embracing this new phase because I knew after so many unhappy years she deserved to finally enjoy life again. She had spent her best years confined in an unfulfilling relationship, and now was her chance to rediscover freedom. As the divorce finalized, my mom was eager to start dating and see what was out there. I could tell the idea of meeting new people and going on adventures made her feel young again, like she was getting a fresh start. Though it had been decades since she was last single, she was ready to dive into the modern dating world. I helped her set up an online dating profile on Tinder, which seemed like an easy way for her to dip her toe in and start out slowly. We laughed hysterically at some of the matches the app suggested. I gave her tips to stay safe if she decided to meet anyone in person. I knew she was an adult and could make her own choices, but I also wanted to look out for her since this was all new territory. At first, my mom just chatted with a few different men on the app, sending me screenshots of their conversations to get my opinion. I could tell the attention and flattery was boosting her confidence that had taken a hit during her unhappy marriage. She seemed to be having fun just putting herself out there, without feeling pressured to rush into anything serious. One potential match immediately stood out to me as bad news, though. His profile pictures were all focused on showing off his muscles, cars, and what looked like expensive belongings. The interest he listed seemed immature, mostly related to partying and hooking up. His bio came across as cocky and aggressive, like he was on Tinder to conquer women as trophies. I pointed out these obvious red flags to my mom, even saying directly that I thought he looked like trouble and she should be cautious. But she brushed off my concerns, saying she could handle herself and not to worry. I think after so many years of having her confidence worn down, part of her felt exhilarated that an attractive, younger guy seemed interested. They started messaging frequently on the app, hitting it off right away. It seemed like he knew exactly what to say to draw her in, likely from plenty of experience seducing women online. He made lavish compliments and flattering remarks that clearly stroked her ego. I still had an uneasy feeling in my gut, but knew I ultimately had to let my mom make her own choices as a grown woman. This was her life, not mine. When he suggested they meet up for drinks, my mom readily agreed despite my reservations. I reminded her to meet in a public place and text me to check in, which she thankfully agreed to just to ease my concerns. I knew I had to give her space to embrace this new chapter, but the protective side of me was still worried. That evening when she texted that she was back safely, I breathed a sigh of relief. Apparently their impromptu first date went well, because the next day my mom shared they had made plans to meet up again before her upcoming work trip. She didn't offer much detail, but I could tell she was excited, which made me happy she was having fun. However, just a few hours later, I got a panic call from her once she arrived at the airport to leave town. Somehow in the very limited time they had interacted, this man she barely knew had figured out which flight she was taking. Using just the airline flight number, he managed to look up the final destination. And with that information, he shockingly was able to find her home address halfway across the country. A quick search of public records provided her full legal name. One simple Facebook search of the name was all it took for him to pull up photos of our whole family, even recent pictures with my dad. I was horrified and in utter disbelief, but it got even worse. This unhinged stranger actually called my dad's personal cell phone number and told him explicit details about his conversations with my mom. He described the flirtatious photos she had texted him, their plans to meet up, and the fact that she was clearly cheating on her ex-husband. It was a complete violation of privacy and breach of trust after less than 48 hours of chatting. The harassment and entitlement didn't stop there either. Over the next several days, this man proceeded to call and text my mom incessantly. He claimed to have fallen in love after their one date and wanted to make the relationship work, but he said he couldn't trust her anymore after she had lied about being single. The more my mom ignored his obsessive messages, the more enraged and volatile he became. It quickly escalated beyond just inappropriate to downright scary. This menacing stranger had managed to track down her flight, home address, family members, and more in an alarming short time. He had fixated on and stalked her both online and in real life, with frighteningly little information to go on. His behavior seemed completely unhinged and potentially dangerous. At that point, my mom realized she needed to get law enforcement involved for her own safety. Thankfully, with the police's help, she was able to get the harassment under control and implement security measures to prevent the man from contacting her or our family further. They ensured he knew his disturbing behavior was illegal. I'd also urged my mom to be cautious and alert in case he made further attempts to approach her. This traumatic ordeal left my mom hesitant to put her. I had recently gone through a bad breakup and was feeling lonely, so on a whim I decided to download Tinder to see if I could meet someone new. After swiping mindlessly for a while, I matched with a girl named Amanda who really caught my eye. She had long blonde hair, a radiant smile, and a witty bio. We started messaging back and forth right away and really hit it off. The banter flowed easily and I felt an instant connection. After a couple hours of continuous messaging, I got caught up in the excitement and gave Amanda a call so we could chat in real time. Hearing her voice only amplified the chemistry between us. We talked and laughed for over an hour, conversing as if we were old friends. In the heat of the moment, I impulsively asked if she wanted to go out the very next night. To my delight, Amanda instantly agreed to the impromptu date suggestion without hesitation. It seemed my luck on Tinder had finally changed, but about 5 minutes after happily making plans, Amanda messaged saying she needed to tell me something important before our date. She confessed that she was permanently confined to a wheelchair due to a spinal cord injury. I sat there in stunned silence, unsure how to respond. I definitely didn't want to cancel the date and come across as discriminatory, but I also didn't want to lead her on if this was going to be a major issue for me. I had never really considered the prospect of dating someone disabled before. After thinking it over, I decided to just go through with the date as planned and see what happened. I figured it was only a first date, and I didn't want to judge prematurely. We said goodnight, and I went to bed feeling optimistic this could still work out. But I also felt nervous about the wheelchair situation and whether I was truly comfortable with it. The next morning, I woke up to an onslaught of texts from Amanda. She was already messaging me by 7 a.m., saying she had done something crazy and couldn't wait to show me later. I asked her repeatedly to tell me what was going on, but she insisted it was a surprise. This definitely struck me as odd behavior. We had only been talking for a day at this point, yet she was already keeping secrets and planning surprises. A few anxious hours went by until Amanda finally called me again mid-afternoon. She had an eager edge to her voice as she explained she was texting me a photo of the crazy thing she did. I hesitantly opened the message, bracing myself for what I might find, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Amanda had tattooed my name in large black script across her wrist. I stared at the image in disbelief, reading my own name permanently etched on this girl's skin. We didn't even really know each other yet, and she already tattooed herself with my name. I immediately called a couple of close friends and told them about the unhinged Tinder girl I had somehow matched with. Despite the tattoo shock, I still headed to Amanda's place that evening to pick her up for our date. I knew I couldn't stand her up after she permanently marked her body for me. When I arrived, I also realized my small car was not built to transport a wheelchair. But Amanda cheerfully said not to worry about it and drove up in her specially equipped vehicle instead. However, I noticed with alarm that it did not appear to be truly handicap accessible beyond hand controls. She simply used her 2 forearm crutches to work the pedals. As we pulled onto the freeway, I gripped my seat tightly, beyond anxious about driving like this. But Amanda seemed perfectly at ease as she erratically sped down the fast lane. We had dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. The conversation was stilted as I struggled to wrap my mind around the tattoo and Amanda's unconventional driving. About halfway through our meal, Amanda got a phone call from her 10-year-old daughter who had been left home alone and was scared. I immediately suggested we rush back to check on the poor girl. But Amanda just laughed it off, saying she had given her daughter some NyQuil to make her sleep. I went to Paul and insisted we leave, but Amanda refused. She wanted to continue the date we had barely started. After arguing briefly, I put my foot down and said I would drive us back to her place right away, whether she liked it or not. I helped Amanda into my cramped back seat, folded up her wheelchair, and tossed her crutches in the trunk. The drive home was painfully slow as I white-knuckled my way through traffic. Amanda sulked the whole time, clearly to know that our date was cut short. As we pulled up to her apartment, she turned to me and slurred, "Wow, I'm kinda drunk." I looked at her in disbelief since she had only 1 glass of wine at dinner. Before I could respond, she declared she was going to drive around the block really fast, then stomped her foot where the gas pedal would be. I realized she was not just drunk, but completely delusional. I hurriedly wheeled Amanda inside and said a quick goodbye, knowing I needed to get as far away from this unhinged woman as possible. I felt relieved to have escaped the night unscathed, but I also now had a permanent reminder of Amanda forever inked on her wrist. My friends were right. I definitely should have been more careful on Tinder. You never know what kind of crazy you might match with. I decided to delete my account for good after that traumatizing first and last date. It was just another night out with my girlfriends when I met him. We were at our usual spot, a trendy bar downtown where the drinks are cheap and guys are plenty. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just wanting to let loose and have some fun after a long week slinging drinks myself at the pub around the corner. My friend Sarah was scrolling through Tinder, swiping left and right and giggling with me about the ridiculous pickup lines guys were using. She showed me his profile and I told her to swipe right. He was just my type with his dark hair and dimpled grin. We laughed and carried on, not thinking much would come of it. But a few minutes later, I got the notification that it was a match. We started chatting and really hit it off. He was charming and funny, and I liked that he seemed down to earth, not full of himself like so many guys on Tinder. After a flirty back and forth, he asked if I wanted to continue the conversation in person. I was feeling spontaneous, so I told him to meet me at the bar. When he walked in the door, he looked even better than his pictures. We sat at a small high-top table and talked for hours, totally lost in conversation. We laughed at each other's jokes and bonded over our shared love of horror films and our mutual hatred of cilantro. I was really digging this guy. Last call came way too soon. I wasn't ready for the night to end, and he said he wasn't either. On a whim, I asked if he wanted to come back to my place. He smiled and said he'd love to. We grabbed a late-night slice of pizza on the walk to my apartment, still chatting effortlessly. Back at my place, sparks were flying like crazy, and before I knew it, we were ripping each other's clothes off. I'd expected him to be a one-night stand, but we had such an amazing connection I broke my rule and let him spend the night. As we caught our breath tangled up in each other's arms, I remember thinking I could really fall for this guy. The next morning, I woke up alone in bed. He left a sweet note thanking me for the amazing night. I smiled thinking about our time together as I gathered my things to head to the gym for a workout. My bank card was nearly maxed out, so I knew I'd have to transfer some money after my workout to cover my bills. At the gym, my debit card was declined and I went to grab a smoothie after my workout. That was weird. I checked my balance and was shocked to see it was nearly zero. There were a bunch of charges I didn't recognize, big purchases at Best Buy, Grubhub, Uber Eats. What the heck? I immediately checked my credit card account and discovered more fraudulent charges. Netflix, Hulu, even a year subscription to Sling. Over $2,000 in total fraudulent charges across the two cards. Now I was pissed. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out there was only one person who could have taken my card numbers, that jerk from Tinder. Thinking back, he'd been in my purse when we were waiting for the pizza. I felt so violated and angry at myself for letting my guard down. I tried to look up his profile, but it had been deleted. Then I remembered my friend Jen had a mutual Facebook friend with him. I messaged her asking if she knew if I could get in touch with him. That's when she told me he did the same thing to her last month. Slept with her after a great Tinder date, and then racked up thousands in charges on her cards. I couldn't believe it. We did some digging together and found 2 other women who had been scammed by him too. He was smooth, I'll give him that. He really had us all fooled, reeling us in with his charm and wit, but it turned out to be an act so he could take advantage of us. I felt so ashamed I'd fallen for it. I always thought I was street smart when it came to guys and dating, but this experience was a wake-up call that you really can't trust anyone, no matter how great they seem. After filing police reports and spending endless hours on the phone with my bank and credit card companies, I was able to get all the fraudulent charges reversed. But I'll never get back the sense of security I lost. My dating life is on hold indefinitely. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to open up and trust someone from an app again after this. Ladies, be careful out there. Don't make the mistakes I did. Follow your gut and know that if something seems too good to be true, it always is. Don't give out personal information easily and keep your guard up until you really know someone. We have to protect ourselves because scumbags like this guy are out there preying on women every day. I've learned that lesson the hard way, but hopefully my story can help save some other women from becoming victims too. I had downloaded Tinder on a whim, not really expecting much. After being single for over a year following a bad breakup, I was lonely and thought maybe online dating would help me dip my toe back into the waters. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some casual dates with new people. At first, I barely got any matches. The few I did match with fizzled out after some boring small talk. I was starting to think Tinder wasn't for me and considered deleting the app. But then one night, Alex popped up on my feed. His photos showed a cute, nerdy guy with brown hair, glasses, and a goofy grin. We seemed to have a lot in common based on his bio, so I swiped right. To my surprise, we matched immediately. Alex messaged me first, complimenting my cool Game of Thrones t-shirt in one of my pics. That sparked a conversation about our favorite fantasy series, which led to us bonding over other nerdy interests like Star Wars, comic books, and obscure indie bands. The chat flowed naturally, and he made me genuinely laugh out loud at his quick-witted jokes. I found myself looking forward to his messages each day. After about a week of consistent chatting, Alex asked if I wanted to meet up for a drink. I said yes without hesitation. We decided to go to Pixel, a bar downtown that had old-school arcade games. It seemed like the perfect casual spot for a first date between two geeks. I was a little nervous, but also really excited to meet Alex in person. His online personality had charmed me, and I was optimistic this could lead to something, even if just friendship. The afternoon of the date, I probably changed my outfit 3 times before settling on my favorite jeans, boots, and a cute top. I did my makeup and blew out my hair, wanting to look nice but not overdone. With butterflies in my stomach, I set out to meet my Tinder match. Pixel was crowded when I arrived, full of hipsters playing skee-ball and Pac-Man. I spotted an open table and snagged it, then ordered a cider while I waited for Alex. I felt my phone buzz with a message from him saying he was parking. A few minutes later, I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to see a lanky guy with brown hair smiling down at me. "Hey, you must be Jen. I'm Alex," he said, and I immediately recognized his voice from our phone call earlier that week. We exchanged an awkward side hug before he sat across from me. The first thing I noticed was that he didn't open his mouth very wide when he spoke. I figured maybe he was just shy and not enunciating. But as we started to talk, it became apparent something was off. His lips barely moved and he mumbled quite a bit. When the waitress came over, Alex ordered a beer. After she walked away, he leaned in and said softly, "Sorry if I'm not making much sense. I'm having trouble speaking because I don't actually have any teeth right now. I must have looked shocked because he hurried to explain. I swear I'm not a meth head or anything. I had to have all my teeth removed a few weeks ago because of an infection. My dentist said it was the only option. I'm waiting for my gums to heal before I can get fitted for dentures. I was taken aback, unsure how to respond. I felt bad that he had gone through such an ordeal, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't totally put off too. I tried not to let my discomfort show on my face. This was definitely a curveball I wasn't expecting on a first date. When Alex's beer arrived, he struggled to take a sip using just his lips to form a seal on the glass. Some of the liquid dribbled down his chin because he couldn't fully close his mouth. He wiped it away casually with the back of his hand. I smiled sympathetically and did my best to keep our conversation going, asking about the graphic novels he was reading. But the elephant in the room was his lack of teeth, which made it difficult to focus on his words. And as we talked, he would occasionally have to purse his lips and spit discreetly into a napkin. With no teeth to stop the flow of saliva, spitting was inevitable, but that didn't make it any less gross or awkward. When our food came, things got worse. Alex had ordered buffalo wings, which he somehow managed to chew using his gums. But all the spitting of small bone fragments and skin into his napkin killed my appetite pretty quickly. I picked at my fries, trying not to stare as he worked hard to eat. I felt bad for Alex. He seemed like a nice, interesting guy who was dealing with a traumatic situation. But the constant spitting and slurring weren't things I could easily overlook. Maybe in time, once he got dentures, we could try again. But for now, the missing teeth were just too much of a hurdle for me. The great banter we had over text had turned into a halting, one-sided conversation in person. After we finished eating, I made a polite excuse that I needed to get up early the next morning. The truth was, I just wanted the day to end. We exchanged an awkward hug and promised to text soon, but I knew I wouldn't see him again. The chemistry we had built up over the previous week had completely fizzled once meeting in person. On the drive home, I felt guilty. Alex seemed like a nice guy who had gone through something traumatic, but we just weren't a match, at least not now. Once he got dentures, he would make some girl very happy, just not me. My first Tinder date gone horribly wrong taught me an important lesson. Don't get too invested in someone until you actually meet them face to face. You can't tell everything about a person through texts, calls, and photos. There could always be surprises in store, whether good or bad. In this case, it was the kind of surprise that instantly killed my interest despite our online chemistry. I was still on Tinder, still looking for a real connection. And I knew there were good guys out there. But this experience taught me to keep my expectations in check until meeting offline. You just never know what you're going to get with online dating. My night with a toothless wonder had me hoping for the best but prepared for the worst on the next first date. I never could have imagined I'd find a fake Tinder profile using my photos. Let me start from the beginning to explain how this bizarre situation unfolded. My name is John, and in my early 20s, I married my high school sweetheart, Amanda. We had been together since junior year and got married shortly after graduation in a small ceremony with close friends and family. In the beginning, everything was great. We were young and in love, excited to start our new life together. About a year into the marriage, problems started to arise. We'd always had this idea that we would grow up and change together, but we ended up growing apart instead. I got really into my job in software sales, often working long hours and weekends. Amanda hated that I was away so much, and we started fighting constantly. Our visions of the future no longer seemed aligned. We tried counseling for a while, but ultimately the divide was too wide. We split amicably, knowing that we had simply married too young before really knowing ourselves. After the divorce, I was in a pretty bad place for a while. I threw myself into work even more to distract myself. I reconnected with old friends and started hitting the gym daily to get into shape. A buddy of mine convinced me to try online dating to get myself back out there. I was skeptical at first, but finally created a profile. For a while, I didn't have much luck, just a few awkward dates here and there. Then I came across Liz's profile and felt an instant connection just from her photos and bio. She was gorgeous with long dark hair and piercing green eyes. Her bio made her seem down to earth with a quirky sense of humor. We messaged back and forth for a week or so before meeting up at a local brewery. When I first saw Lisa in person, I was blown away by her warm smile and loving aura. We hit it off immediately and conversation flowed so naturally. I found myself opening up about my divorce, something I rarely discussed on first dates. There was an undeniable chemistry between us. Lisa and I started spending all our free time together. We just couldn't get enough of each other. She was so easygoing and fun to be around. We liked doing simple activities like going on hikes or trying new restaurants in the city. Lisa made me laugh harder than I had in years. I knew in my gut that she was the one for me early on. Within 6 months, we were officially a couple, and I asked her to move in with me. Our relationship kept getting stronger and stronger. We never ran out of things to talk about and had similar values and goals for the future. After 2 years of dating, I was ready to propose. I took Lisa on a romantic weekend getaway to her favorite bed and breakfast and popped the question at sunset on a secluded hiking trail. Through happy tears, she said yes. Lisa and I got married last spring in intimate vineyard ceremony. All our close friends and family were there, and it was the happiest day of my life. I felt like the luckiest man alive marrying my true soulmate. These last 6 months as newlyweds have been absolute bliss. Everything was perfect until I got a shocking text from my buddy Mike. He sent me a screenshot of a Tinder profile using my name and photos. I was completely confused since I hadn't used Tinder in years. In the profile it said I was John, 28 and single. It had pictures of me skiing, hanging with friends, and other shots from my Facebook page. My heart dropped into my stomach. Who would make a fake dating profile pretending to be me? And that's when it hit me. My ex-wife Amanda was the only one who would do something so vindictive. She always had a manipulative, spiteful edge to her. I racked my brain trying to figure out why she would latch on now after years of no contact. Maybe she heard I was happily married through the grapevine and wanted to cause problems in my new relationship. I asked Mike to do some investigating to confirm my suspicions about Amanda. With his tech skills, he traced the IP address from the Tinder account back to Amanda's current address. I felt sick. She was clearly trying to sabotage my marriage as some kind of twisted revenge plot. My first instinct was to immediately come clean to Lisa, but I worried she would freak out and it would sow seeds of distrust in our relationship. I decided to bide my time gathering concrete evidence before telling Lisa, so she would know for sure I wasn't actually active on Tinder. Mike did some more digging and found Amanda had been chatting with various women through the fake account, posing as me to try and arrange meetups. Seeing the screenshots of her messages pretending to be me made my blood boil. This was a complete violation, not just of my privacy, but my entire identity. Once I had undeniable proof, I knew it was time to tell Lisa everything. I explained the bizarre situation the best I could, showing her the screenshots. Understandably, Lisa felt upset and betrayed. But she believed me when I swore it wasn't my account and I would never cheat on her. I think it helped that she already knew about Amanda's toxic personality. We had a long, emotional conversation about how to move forward. I promised Lisa I would report the profile immediately to get it removed. I also planned to confront Amanda about this massive breach of trust. Lisa agreed that Amanda's behavior was completely out of line and said she felt better after hashing it all out. She reiterated her confidence in our strong bond. This insane ordeal felt like such an invasion of my privacy and could have seriously damaged my marriage. Ungrateful Lisa responded with grace rather than anger. We won't let Amanda's toxic schemes come between us. Our communication and trust prevailed. As for Amanda, her harassment has consequences. I'm reporting her to the authorities and will pursue legal action if necessary. She needs to learn she can't manipulate people's lives on a whim. Lisa and I refuse to let Amanda's drama derail our happiness. What we have built together is unbreakable. This incident only reinforced that our relationship can withstand anything, even a vindictive ex-wife's lies. Amanda wanted to stir up trouble, but she only made our marriage stronger. I still can't believe I was so stupid. I'm usually a pretty cautious guy, but something about Amanda just made me throw all reason out the window. We'd have been chatting on Tinder for a couple weeks and really hit it off. She was gorgeous, funny, and seemed really down to earth. I was thrilled when she finally agreed to meet up in person. We met at a bar downtown for a couple drinks. The conversation flowed easily and she was even better looking in real life. After a few hours of laughing and flirting, she suggested we get out of there and go back to my place. I was more than happy to oblige. As we walked to my car, she slid her arm around my waist and gave me a playful smile. I was on cloud 9. We hopped in my car and started driving to my apartment. About halfway there, Amanda let out a dramatic sigh and said she left her purse at the bar. She asked if we could swing back by and grab it real quick. I didn't think much of it and made a U-turn to head back. When we pulled up, Amanda asked if I could wait in the car while she ran to get her purse. She said she didn't want me to have to pay for parking again just for a minute. Again, I didn't hesitate and told her I'd be right here waiting for her. As she started getting out of the car, she asked if she could borrow my keys to lock it while she was inside, since this neighborhood could be sketchy at night. I tossed her my keys without a second thought. She smiled, told me I was the best, and headed into the bar. I sat there listening to music and daydreaming about the rest of our night together. After about 5 minutes, I glanced back at the bar entrance, expecting to see Amanda walking out any minute, but she was nowhere in sight. 10 more minutes went by and I started to get an uneasy feeling. I sent her a quick text asking if everything was okay. No response. At that point, panic started to set in. I jumped out of the car to run inside and look for her. But when I got to the driver's side door, my heart dropped. It was unlocked. She had never gone back inside at all. Amanda had stolen my car right from under me. I felt like the world's biggest idiot. I should have known better than to just hand over my keys to a virtual stranger. But I had been so caught up in how well we hit it off, I threw all logic out the window. I stood there in stunned disbelief for who knows how long before finally pulling out my phone to call the police. They came and took down all the details, but warned me the chances of getting my car back were slim. He said scam artists working Tinder were becoming more and more common. Over the next few days, I compulsively checked for any updates from the police. I also couldn't stop berating myself for being so foolish. I had never let myself be so easily manipulated before. But Amanda had seemed so genuine and trustworthy. She really had me convinced she was interested in me. About a week later, I finally got a call from the police that my car had been recovered on the other side of the city. It was a bit roughed up, but still drivable. I'd never heard if Amanda was found or faced any charges. I tried to put it all behind me and be thankful I got my car back at all, but I was still angry at myself for letting it happen in the first place. After that, I took a long break from dating apps. It really made me distrustful of meeting strangers online. When I finally did dip my toes back in, I was much more cautious. I never again let things progress too quickly or let my guard down like I did with Amanda. This experience taught me a hard lesson about balancing open-heartedness with wisdom when getting to know new people. I believe most folks are good at their core, but there are predators out there looking to take advantage. I'm thankful I escaped relatively unscathed, but it shook me to my core. Going forward, I knew I needed to keep my eyes open and stay grounded in common sense when meeting someone new. My buddies still give me crap about the whole thing. And I know I'll never live down being so dumbstruck by a pretty girl that I literally handed over the keys to my car. But as mortifying as it was also a valuable life lesson. I'm now much better at listening to my intuition and not ignoring red flags, even if I really like someone. Getting conned made me warier, but also wiser in the long run. So, while that ill-fated night was quite the disaster, I did take something positive away from the experience. I learned to balance being open-hearted with using good judgment when meeting new people, and that has served me well in all aspects of life, not just dating. I'm still a bit embarrassed I let my guard down so fully, but I'm grateful for the lesson and don't intend to repeat that mistake again. This brush with the Tinder scam artist left me shaken, but ultimately smarter about protecting myself while still giving people the benefit of the doubt. And that's a lesson worth learning, even the hard way. I still get chills down my spine when I reminisce about my unnerving experience with Mark from Tinder. It was several months ago when we first started conversing on the dating app. At first glance, his profile seemed innocuous. Average looking, interests in sports and hiking, a pretty generic bio. When we began messaging, he came across as nice enough, if a bit dull. There was no obvious red flag to make me hesitate chatting with him further. In retrospect, I deeply regret letting my guard down and sharing personal details, especially telling him where I worked. That seemingly small slip created a snowball of scary incidents. Our initial back and forth was mundane, just exchanging superficial facts and talking about hobbies or favorite foods. After a few days, Mark asked me more probing questions like my last name, where I went to school, and where my office was located. I answered, not seeing the harm in informing him about my job in public relations downtown. I mentioned the name of my firm and the street it was on. At the time, it felt like basic getting to know you topics. Red flag number 1 arose a couple evenings later when I was walking home from the train past my office building. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a man across the street who bore an uncanny resemblance to Mark's photos. He was just standing there watching the entrance, not even pretending to look at his phone or anything else to appear occupied. The man's intent gaze in my direction gave me an uneasy vibe. I shrugged it off, figuring there was no way it could actually be Mark since we hadn't even met in person yet. A few days afterward, I was working a quiet afternoon shift when my phone battery started draining faster than expected. I messaged Mark I'd have to talk later after I recharged. Mere minutes afterward, who should stroll into the lobby but Mark himself, holding an iPhone charger. I was completely blindsided to see him just show up unannounced at my workplace when he told me he lived clear across the city. His sudden materialization felt unsettling rather than thoughtful. Mark cheerfully said he wanted to bring me a charger as a gift to help me out. I was too shocked to respond how inappropriate this felt. He didn't seem to pick up on my speechless discomfort. I wanted to tell Mark to leave immediately, but I hesitated to cause a scene at my office. I amnesigally thanked him for the charger and said I'd return it soon. Mark suggested meeting at a bar around the corner after I finished working to give back the charger. I reluctantly agreed just to get in out of the building as quickly as possible. The rest of the afternoon I felt anxious and unproductive. When I met with him briefly after work, Mark acted like everything was perfectly normal between us. I made some excuse about needing to get home as I handed back the charger. Later at home, I decided to check if Mark had posted anything about our interaction on social media. I was horrified to discover on Instagram he posted a photo of us together captioned, "I'm a taken man now." Everything about the post implied we were a couple when in reality we'd only interacted twice. He was delusional about the nature of our relationship. Over the next couple weeks, the situation escalated from concerning to downright alarming. Every evening when I left work around 6 p.m., I would spot Mark loitering on the sidewalk near my office building. It became obvious he was deliberately timing his presence around when I finished my shift, despite the fact that he supposedly lived miles away. I experimented with altering my departure time, leaving earlier or later or slipping out the back door. It didn't matter. Mark continued lurking right outside within minutes of me leaving. He made feeble pretenses that it was just a crazy coincidence running into me. It was clearly a lie, though, since he had no logical reason to be in that neighborhood regularly. I finally worked up the courage to confront Mark face to face and make unambiguously clear that his behavior was unacceptable, and he needed to leave me alone entirely going forward. Of course he played innocent, claiming he just wanted to get to know me better and didn't understand why I was upset. I reiterated firmly that I wasn't interested in any further contact and his unannounced visits had to stop immediately. When he tried to argue, I shut him down and said the discussion was over. I also blocked his number and all social media accounts. For several weeks after the confrontation, I remained on edge when leaving work in the evenings. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting Mark to emerge from the shadows. My coworkers knew about the creepy situation, so they started walking me in my car or the train station at night. Their presence reassured me. Gradually, I felt less anxious and began to relax again after the Mark debacle. Looking back with more experience now, I'm grateful I trusted my instincts when his behavior seemed amiss. I'm fortunate things didn't escalate into a scarier or dangerous situation before I cut contact. I learned the hard way to be much more cautious sharing personal information when interacting with strangers online. I now keep conversations strictly superficial until I meet someone in person and can better gauge if they are trustworthy. While most people online are perfectly nice, there are unhinged individuals like Mark lurking in the shadows. Staying vigilant protects me from repeating that kind of unsettling encounter. I had just moved to the big city after finishing college in my sleepy hometown. I didn't know a soul here yet and was eager to meet people and make new friends. Maybe even find a special someone to date. On a whim one night, I downloaded Tinder since it seemed like an easy way to connect in this massive, anonymous metropolis. After setting up my profile with some flattering selfies and a clever bio, I started swiping. There were so many good-looking people on there. It was almost overwhelming trying to decide who to like or pass on. I matched with a few girls who seemed cute and interesting over the first week. We exchanged some messages about favorite foods, TV shows, and other small talk, but the conversations always fizzled out pretty quickly. Then one night I came across Jessica's profile. She was gorgeous, wavy brown hair, radiant smile, curvy figure. Her bio said she had just moved here too for a job in marketing. We like a lot of the same podcasts, and were both excited to try a new ramen restaurant that had opened downtown. I super liked her and held my breath waiting to see if we matched. Sure enough, a few minutes later I got the notification that she had liked me back. We started chatting and really hit it off right away. The banter flowed naturally and made each other laugh. Jessica seemed so easygoing and was up for anything, my kind of girl. After a couple days of flirting via messaging, she suggested meeting up in person. Specifically, she invited me to a party at her place that weekend. I was thrilled. Not only did she want to meet so soon, but she was inviting me over to her home. Things were moving fast, but in an exciting way. I showed up at Jessica's house right on time, Saturday evening, dressed in my sharpest casual outfit. I had stopped to pick up a nice bottle of wine, too, which I hoped would impress her. She answered the door with a warm, welcoming smile and invited me in. My heart did a little flutter seeing how pretty she looked in person. The living room already had a handful of guys hanging out drinking beers. It seemed around my age, mid to late 20s. Jessica introduced them as her friends Dan, Mike, and Steve. I said hey and shook their hands, although it seemed like they didn't know each other either. I noticed a couple more guys milling around in the kitchen area too. Guess Jessica had a lot of male friends. I cracked open the wine and poured us both a glass, settling into the couch next to Jessica. I tried making conversation with the three guys she had introduced me to, but it was a little awkward. They'd give short, disinterested answers and barely asked me any questions in return. Over the next hour, more and more guys kept showing up to the party. The doorbell rang again and again as Jessica welcomed them in. I counted at least 15 dudes crammed into her small house at this point. The testosterone levels were rising as we sized each other up. I leaned in and asked Jessica what was up with this being a total sausage fest. She just laughed and said the more the merrier. I was starting to feel uncomfortable though, being one of the only guys here who didn't seem to know anyone else. The whole vibe was kind of awkward, with stilted conversations between strangers. I checked my phone, wondering if I should fake an emergency call from my mom so I could escape. But I didn't want Jessica to think I was flaky or nervous on our first meetup. Maybe I was just being paranoid for no reason. I decided to stick out a little longer and see what happened. Eventually, one of the louder, more outgoing guys shouted out that we should all go around saying how we know the birthday girl since it was apparently her big day. Birthday party. Jessica hadn't mentioned anything about that when she invited me over. We went around the room and every single guy said they had met Jessica within the past week on Tinder. My eyes widened in surprise and confusion realizing she had invited all these random dudes she matched with instead of actual friends. I pulled Jessica aside and gently asked what was going on. Why had she filled up her birthday party with a bunch of guys from Tinder? She shrugged and casually admitted she was new in town and didn't have many girlfriends yet. She thought it would be fun to invite some cute guys over that she had been messaging with. I told her frankly that it seemed kind of misleading and uncool to trick us all like that. The other guys started chiming in, equally annoyed and bewildered that Jessica had essentially catfished them into being guests at her own birthday bash. The mood in the room quickly turned sour as the guys started filtering out, complaining about the false pretense they had shown up under. I said a quick goodbye to Jessica and left too, angry that she had wasted my time and made me feel like an idiot. Walking home, I berated myself for not verifying our plans better before showing up somewhere unfamiliar. But how could I have known my seemingly sweet Tinder match would dupe me into attending her own birthday party filled with random guys from the app? It was a truly bizarre scenario. When I got back to my apartment, I immediately deleted Jessica's number and the Tinder app itself. I considered squaring off online dating altogether after that uncomfortable experience. But after about a week, my curiosity got the better of me and I re-downloaded Tinder. I knew I just had to be way more cautious now about who I agreed to meet in person. From then on, I made sure to always do a video call with a match first to confirm their identity. And I tried to get to know them better over the phone before meeting up to verify our personalities really clicked. No more accepting random party invites from women I had never actually laid eyes on. In hindsight, the whole night at Jessica's was ridiculous, but it made for a hilarious story to tell my buddies later over beers. We all had a great laugh at how excited I was to finally meet this gorgeous girl, only to show up at her house party and discover a horde of other confused guys. At least none of us suffered any real harm beyond feeling foolish for being duped. It was a valuable lesson in verifying people's identities from online dating before meeting in person. I'm grateful I trusted my instincts to get out of there quickly. Jessica definitely gave online dating a bad reputation with her sneaky birthday scheme, but the experience taught me to be more vigilant for red flags when chatting with strangers online. While most people are normal, you occasionally find someone shady looking to take advantage. I'm lucky I escaped that party unscathed and can now laugh about the memory. But showing up blindly to some unknown person's house could have ended much worse. I'm now wiser about protecting myself online and heeding any bad vibes. Moving forward, I feel better prepared to safely navigate online dating. I'll be more proactive about vetting matches and setting up meetings in public places first. With some caution and common sense, I'm optimistic I can still meet amazing people and maybe even find love. This city is huge with so many possibilities. Thanks to that crazy birthday bash, I'll make smarter decisions to keep myself safe while still putting myself out there. It was a Friday night when I decided to take a chance and meet up with my Tinder match, Ethan. We had been chatting for a few weeks and seemed to really hit it off. He was charming, funny, and we shared a lot of common interests. When he asked me out for drinks, I figured there was no harm in taking a chance and meeting up in person. We agreed to meet at a trendy bar downtown that I had been wanting to check out. I took extra time getting ready, making sure my hair and makeup looked good. A part of me wondered if this could be the start of something real. Dating had been tough lately, and I was hoping Ethan might finally be a good guy. I arrived at the bar a few minutes early to scope it out. It had a hip, industrial vibe with exposed brick walls and string lights hanging from the ceiling. I got us a high-top table in the corner so we'd be able to hear each other talk. I ordered a glass of wine and tried to ignore the nervous fluttering in my stomach as I waited for him to arrive. Right on time, I saw Ethan walk in. He looked just like his photos. Tall, muscular build, stylish haircut. He gave me a big smile and waved when he spotted me. I stood up to give him a quick hug. He smelled good like expensive cologne. We sat and launched right into easy conversation. He was just as funny and charming in person. The wine kept flowing, and I realized I was actually having a really nice time. After a few hours, the bar was starting to empty out. Ethan suggested we go back to his place for another drink. In the moment, it seemed harmless enough. The night was still young, and I was enjoying his company. But looking back now, I wish I had just gone home instead. We took a short Uber ride to his high-rise apartment building downtown. He led me up to the 20th floor, unlocked the door, and gestured grandly for me to enter. "Make yourself at home," he said with a smile. The apartment was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city. He'd offered me a glass of wine, and I settled onto the large leather couch. Classical music played softly in the background. It was then that I noticed the first camera. It was small and discreet, tucked away in a corner near the TV. An uneasy feeling started to wash over me, but I tried to push it down. Perhaps it was just part of the security system, I told myself. But over the next few minutes, I noticed more, 3 in the living room, 2 in the kitchen. My heart started to pound. Something wasn't right here. I turned to Ethan, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, what is security system you got here? Any particular reason?" He paused, looking at me intently. One can never be too safe these days. I stood up abruptly, setting a wine glass down on the table with a shaking hand. "You know what, it's getting late. I should really get home." Ethan moved swiftly, blocking my path to the door. "Don't be ridiculous, the night is still young. Come, let me show you the view from the balcony." He grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip as I struggled to pull away. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. I knew I had to get out of there. Wrenching my arm back with all my strength, I shoved past him and ran for the door, ignoring his shouts behind me. I sprinted down the hallway to the elevator, repeatedly jamming the call button. My heart pounded in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, the elevator doors opened. I rushed in, punching the button for the lobby. As the doors slid closed, I saw Ethan running down the hall toward me. face contorted in anger. I collapsed against the elevator wall, struggling to catch my breath. The full weight of the situation hit me. Those cameras, he had been watching me, recording me this whole time. Bile rose in my throat as I thought about him reviewing and watching the footage from tonight. When I got to my car, I immediately drove to the police station downtown. In a shaky voice, I told them the whole story. 2 uniformed officers took my statement and assured me they would investigate right away. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as my mind raced. What if he had footage of me in my own home? The thought made me sick. First thing in the morning, I called a security company to do a sweep of my entire apartment for hidden cameras. Thankfully, they found none, but the violation I felt could not be erased. Over the next few weeks, I withdrew from friends and work colleagues, ashamed over what had happened. The police investigation revealed Ethan had terabytes of footage of other women he had recorded without consent. He was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. I blamed myself for not trusting my instincts. If only I had never gone to his apartment that night. Months of therapy helped, but I still felt paranoid any time I went on dates or met men online. I realized I needed a fresh start. I broke my lease, quit my job, and moved across the country to reset. It took time, but slowly I regained my confidence and sense of security. That night was a harsh lesson in listening to my intuition. I'm thankful I escaped relatively unscathed, but it pains me to think of the other victims who were not so lucky. Now I am much more cautious when meeting strangers online. The experience left me warier, but also wiser. I choose to focus on moving forward, not letting one night define my entire future. What happened was not my fault, and I will not let my capacity for trust be taken away. It was a chilly Friday evening when I made the fateful decision to go out with Ethan, my Tinder match from earlier that week. We had hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of horror films and obscure bands. His witty banter and flirtatious remarks soon charmed me into agreeing to a proper first date. I was excited but nervous as I got ready, having a gut feeling that something was off. But I brushed it aside, not wanting my anxiety to ruin the night. Ethan had suggested meeting at a bar downtown for drinks. I arrived early, settling into a booth and ordering a gin and tonic to calm my nerves. I checked my phone anxiously as I waited for him to show up, worried that I was being stood up. Just as I was about to give up hope, he strolled in, tall and handsome, just like his photos. I waved to get his attention and he made his way over, apologizing for being late. We launched into easy conversation, the drinks helping to loosen us both up. He was even more charming in person, making me laugh as he told animated stories about his work and friends. I found myself lowering my guard as the night went on, charmed by his confidence and interest in getting to know me. After a few hours of drinking and flirting, Ethan suggested heading back to his place to hang out and listen to records. In my tipsy state, it seemed like an exciting idea. We grabbed a cab to his apartment across town, my apprehension drowned out by drunken excitement. The first red flag should have been the neighborhood, a rundown part of the city that looked deserted at this late hour. As we walked into the dingy apartment building, I felt a prickle of unease. But Ethan reassured me cheerfully that the place looked better on the inside. I hesitated briefly before following him in, the effects of the alcohol clouding my judgment. His apartment was dimly lit and cluttered, every surface covered in piles of books, papers, and strange trinkets. The decor was an unsettling mishmash of creepy antiques and macabre artwork that gave the place an ominous feel. I perched awkwardly on a moth-eaten armchair as Ethan rummaged through a stack of vinyl records. "Make yourself comfortable, I'll fix us some drinks," he said with a smile, disappearing into the kitchen. I nodded nervously, glancing around the room. My instincts were screaming at me to get out of there, but I didn't want to seem rude or unadventurous. Ethan returned with 2 glasses of wine and sat down close beside me on the couch. As we sipped our drinks, he began peppering me with questions about my family, friends, and work. I gave vague responses, growing increasingly unsettled by his invasive queries and intense stare. The night took an even more bizarre turn when he suddenly stood up and began pacing around the room, muttering under his breath. He seemed to be speaking to someone who wasn't there, arguing about things I couldn't quite make out. I sat frozen on the couch, debating whether to politely excuse myself or make a run for it. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan sat back down heavily beside me. He turned to look at me, his eyes wide and a little wild. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about death and the great beyond lately," he said. "Do you ever contemplate what happens to our souls when we die?" I stammered that I tried not to dwell on such morbid topics, my heart hammering. This was my chance to leave this increasingly frightening situation. But as I made moves to stand up, Ethan placed a firm hand on my shoulder, keeping me pinned in place. "You can't leave yet, the night is still young," he said with a strange smile. "We have so much more to talk about." Panic flooded my body as I realized I was trapped there. I had no way to escape the apartment on my own, and Ethan had no intention of letting me go. The charming, funny guy from the bar was gone, replaced by this erratic, intense stranger. My panic only grew as Ethan retrieved an ancient-looking leather book from a nearby shelf. He eagerly flipped it open, launching into a detailed description of occult rituals, sacrifices, and dark magic. I listened in horror as he pointed to strange symbols and diagrams, explaining their meaning with disturbing delight. As he became more animated, I desperately looked around for any means of escape, but the apartment was locked up tight, with no windows or doors left ajar. Ethan had made sure I was secured in his sinister lair. Summoning every bit of courage I had left, I leaped up from the couch while Ethan was mid-sentence and made a break for the front door. He yelled in surprise and rage, grabbing at me as I rushed past. My hands shook violently as I struggled to unlock the myriad of latches and chains barring my exit. Just as I managed to get the door open, I felt Ethan's fists twisting into my hair as he attempted to drag me back inside. Blind panic took over and I lashed out violently. Managing to break free of his grasp, I ran for my life down the stairs and out of the building, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car. My heart pounded as I sped away, watching the shadowy building disappear from view in my rearview mirror. I realized how close I had come to a grim fate at the hands of the deranged stranger I had agreed to go home with. It was a chilling lesson in being aware of red flags and trusting my instincts when something feels amiss. I drove home shaken, filled with immense relief at my narrow escape. After that night, I vowed to be much more cautious and selective when meeting matches from any dating app. The experience had shown me that you can't always trust who someone appears to be online. I was lucky to make out unharmed, but things could have ended very differently. It was a wake-up call I will soon forget. I was really excited for my Tinder date tonight with Dave, a guy I had matched with a few weeks ago. We had been chatting regularly, and he seemed friendly and down-to-earth in our messages. When he asked me out to dinner at Bluefin, a fancy seafood restaurant downtown, I gladly accepted. I don't get asked out somewhere that nice very often. Since it was a special date, I decided to get dolled up. I took my time curling my long brown hair into soft waves and did my makeup with some smoky eyeshadow and red lipstick. I put on my new black wrap dress that fit in all the right places and accentuated my curves. I even strapped on a pair of black heels, despite my feet already aching at the thought. But beauty is pain, right? I spritzed on some perfume and gave myself a final look in the mirror, not too shabby. I was pleased with how the effort paid off. I drove downtown, found a parking spot within a block of Bluefin, and headed towards the restaurant. As I walked up, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window and smiled. I really did look great. Hopefully Dave would notice. I gave the hostess my name, and she led me through the elegant dining room to a table next to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm pink glow across the water. What a picturesque scene for a date. I settled into the tall-backed chair and ordered a glass of Pinot Grigio while I waited for Dave to arrive. I sipped the crisp white wine and watched the boats bobbing gently in the harbor. I started to feel a few butterflies flutter in my stomach. Whether from excitement or nerves, I wasn't sure. I just hoped the date would go well. Dave seemed really great over text, but you never know until you meet in person. After 15 minutes passed, I started to feel a bit anxious. There was still no sign of Dave. I checked my phone again, but didn't have any messages from him. Maybe traffic was backed up or he couldn't find parking. The waiter came by to see if I wanted to order any appetizers. I asked him to just give me a few more minutes for my date to arrive. He probably thought I was being stood up, but I tried not to jump to conclusions yet. At the half-hour mark with no word from Dave, the butterflies in my stomach turned into a pit. Something must be wrong for him to be this late without any notice. I texted asking if he was close by, but never got a response. I sipped my wine nervously and watched the door, willing Dave to walk in. After 45 minutes of waiting, the harsh reality set in. I was being stood up. I couldn't believe Dave would do this. He seemed so kind and considerate over text. Was he that good at pretending to be someone he wasn't? What a waste of a nice dress and perfectly curled hair, I thought, feeling dejected. I asked the waiter for the check just to pay for my wine. I avoided eye contact, embarrassment flushing my cheeks. The waiter must think I'm such a loser being stood up on a date. I quickly signed the receipt and gathered my things, keeping my head down as I hurried for the exit. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I speed walked down the street towards my car, holding back tears. How could I let myself get so excited for this date, for someone I barely knew? I felt like an idiot dressed to the nines, dining alone while Dave was probably home laughing and tricking me. The sadness swirling in my chest quickly turned to anger. How dare he humiliate me like this? He didn't deserve any more of my tears or my time. Once in the safety of my car, I let a few angry tears spill down my cheeks, ruining my perfect makeup. But I wasn't about to waste this look entirely. Still fuming, I called my friend Lily to meet up for drinks and vent about my disastrous night. She was just as shocked as I was by Dave's behavior. We stayed out late drinking wine and trash-talking men, which helped take my mind off that jerk. I wasn't going to let some lame Tinder date ruin my whole night. On the drive home, I resolved to delete Dave from my contacts and remove our Tinder connection as soon as I got in the door. He didn't deserve an explanation or second chance after standing me up so rudely. His actions made his true, inconsiderate character abundantly clear. I washed the tear-stained makeup from my face and changed into cozy pajamas, happy to be home after the night I had. Curling up on the couch with a glass of wine and my cat, I was thankful I had such a great friend like Lily to cheer me up. I was proud of myself for moving on from Dave so quickly rather than moping. While the rejection stung at first, it was a valuable lesson about protecting my heart and not over-investing early on. I shouldn't spend hours getting ready for a first date with someone I barely know. And I need to make sure any matches demonstrate consistent interest and respect before getting my hopes up. Dating requires thick skin sometimes, but I know there's a great guy out there for me who would never pull a stunt like this. Each bad date just brings me one step closer to finding him. I had matched with Lisa on Tinder about 3 weeks prior. We really hit it off chatting over the app, realizing we had a ton in common in terms of interests, sense of humor, and outlook on life. After several long conversations about deep topics like our childhoods, future goals, and past relationships, I worked up the courage to ask if she wanted to finally meet up in person. She enthusiastically agreed, and we made plans to meet for coffee that Saturday afternoon at a cafe downtown. I'll admit I was feeling pretty excited leading up to it. Lisa seemed like the total package, gorgeous in her photos, intelligent, funny, and easy to talk to. I arrived at the cafe early, wanting to secure a table with a view of the door so I could watch for her arrival. 15 minutes passed and I started to feel a bit nervous, wondering if I'd been stood up. But soon I spotted Lisa walking in, looking just as pretty as her pictures with long blonde hair, sparkling green eyes, and a warm smile. I waved her over and she apologized for running late, explaining she had trouble finding parking. We queued up together to order. The barista seemed to flirt a bit with Lisa, complimenting her on her floral sundress. I felt an unexpected pang of jealousy when I noticed she smiled back at him. Once we got our drinks, we settled at a table by the window that I had snagged earlier. The conversation flowed easily as we recounted funny Tinder experiences. I made Lisa laugh a lot with my stories of my disastrous dates. About 20 minutes in, I noticed a guy enter the cafe who kept glancing over at us. He was tall with a muscular build and a bit of a scowl on his face. I figured he was just having a bad day, but he continued to pace by the front counter, peering over at our table while waiting for his order. A bad feeling started to creep up that something might be wrong. My concerns were validated when a few minutes later, the man suddenly stormed over to our table, slammed his hands down, and angrily asked Lisa who I was. I was stunned into silence as he started accusing her of cheating on him with me right there in public. Lisa seemed just as shocked, trying to calmly explain I was just a friend, like I wasn't having it. He started yelling about how he just knew this was a date, and he always suspected she was being unfaithful. By now, the whole cafe was staring, but he didn't seem to care. I sat there open-mouthed, unable to believe this was happening on first date. Lisa had never mentioned a boyfriend during our many conversations, so I had no idea she was in a relationship. I felt confused and embarrassed as the scene escalated, with Lisa trying unsuccessfully to reason with her enraged boyfriend as he cried about the betrayal. The manager hurried over from behind the counter and threatened to call the police if the disruptive boyfriend didn't leave immediately. He glared angrily at me and Lisa before storming out of the cafe. Lisa put her head in her hands, clearly mortified by the whole dramatic ordeal. She profusely apologized, explaining that they had been having major issues and she should have told me she was still technically in a relationship rather than misrepresenting her status. I was pretty upset she hadn't been honest, but figured now was not the time for accusations. An uncomfortable awkwardness clouded the rest of our time together. We silently finished our drinks, avoiding eye contact or conversation. I quickly paid the bill and we walked out to the parking lot, the stares of the cafe patrons following us. Lisa again said she understood if I didn't want to see her again after the disastrous first date. I told her I just needed some time alone to process what had happened before making any decisions. On the drive home, I replayed the bizarre incident over and over, still in disbelief at how wrong things had gone. I had been so excited at the prospect of getting to know Lisa better, only to have reality come crashing down with the revelation she had a boyfriend the whole time we'd been chatting. I understood relationships could be complicated, but I wished she'd been honest from the beginning. After a few days, I decided it was best if Lisa and I went our separate ways. I let her know as gently as I could that I didn't think things would work out for us after what happened. She said she understood and apologized again for putting me in such an awkward position. I wished her well and hoped she could work things out in her relationship, or find the courage to leave if that's what needed to happen. I definitely counted this as my most dramatic and memorable Tinder date yet. It gave me quite the story to share with friends later on, who were all shocked at how quickly the reveal transpired. I was feeling pretty discouraged after putting myself out there only to have things crumble spectacularly. But with time, I regained my optimism and was willing to get back on the dating horse again. After all, not every match could end up being secretly in a relationship with a temperamental boyfriend. This experience taught me lessons about being cautious with online dating, but I didn't want one bad apple to spoil my chances at finding love. The day I decided to try online dating was a turning point in my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. It had been several months since the devastating loss of my girlfriend, Sarah, and the thought of putting myself out there again felt daunting. But my friends had been persistent, insisting that it was time for me to move on and find happiness once more. With a mix of trepidation and cautious optimism, I downloaded the Tinder app and began swiping through profiles. At first, it all felt so foreign and impersonal, like I was shopping for a potential partner rather than truly connecting with someone. But then, as I scrolled through the endless stream of faces, one profile caught my eye. Her name was Sarah, and she was breathtakingly beautiful. I couldn't help but be drawn to the warmth of her smile and the way her eyes seemed to sparkle with life. It was as if she was reaching through the screen and capturing my attention. Without a moment's hesitation, I swiped right, praying that she would feel the same connection. To my surprise and delight, it was a match I couldn't believe my luck, and I immediately set to work crafting the perfect opening message. I wanted to strike the right balance, charming but not too forward, intrigued but not desperate. After several attempts, I settled on a simple introduction, asking her about her interests and hoping to spark a genuine conversation. The response I received was even better than I could have hoped for. Sarah was warm, witty, and seemingly just as interested in getting to know me. We exchanged messages back and forth, our conversation flowing effortlessly as we discovered common interests and shared our stories. It wasn't long before we decided to take things offline and meet up for coffee. As I walked into the cozy cafe, my heart was racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. What if she didn't live up to the image I had built up in my mind? What if we didn't have the same connection in person? But the moment I laid eyes on Sarah, all of my worries melted away. She was even more stunning in person, and her infectious energy immediately put me at ease. We spent hours talking, sharing stories, and getting to know each other on a deeper level. I was captivated by her passion for travel, her dry sense of humor, and the way she listened intently to everything I had to say. Time seemed to fly by, and before we knew it, the cafe was closing for the night. As we said our goodbyes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment that our date had come to an end. But the butterflies in my stomach told me that this was just the beginning of something special. Over the next few weeks, our connection only grew stronger. We continued to see each other, each date more memorable than the last. Sarah was unlike anyone I had ever met before. She had a way of making me feel understood and accepted, even on my most difficult days. One night, as we strolled through a local park, hand in hand, she turned to me and said, "You know, I've never felt this way about anyone before." My heart skipped a beat, and I knew in that moment that I felt the same way. We spent the next several months in a whirlwind of love and happiness, doing everything together and cherishing every moment. But then tragedy struck. One day, I received a call that would change my life forever. Sarah had been in a terrible accident, and she didn't survive. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I was completely devastated. I found myself spiraling into a deep depression, unable to comprehend the loss of the woman I loved more than anything. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled to come to terms with her absence. I spent countless hours scrolling through our old messages and photos, desperately trying to hold on to the memories we had created together. It was a torturous process, but it was the only way I knew how to cope with the overwhelming grief. It was during this time that I made a startling discovery. As I was swiping through Tinder one night, I came across a profile that looked eerily familiar. It was Sarah's, but that couldn't be possible, I thought to myself. She was gone. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Surely this had to be some kind of sick joke. But as I looked closer, I couldn't deny the resemblance. It was her, down to the smallest detail. Filled with a mix of emotions, disbelief, hope, and a tinge of fear, I decided to take a chance and swipe right. To my surprise, it was a match. I immediately messaged the profile, my hands shaking as I typed. "Sarah, is that really you?" The response came almost instantly, and I nearly dropped my phone. "Hi, it's me. I'm so sorry I didn't know how to tell you." In that moment, my world turned upside down. Sarah was alive, and she was right there, just a few taps away on my phone. I didn't know how to feel. A part of me was overjoyed, while another part was filled with confusion and hurt. How could she have lied to me and faked her own death? We spent the next several hours talking, with Sarah explaining that she had faked her own death in order to escape a dangerous situation. She had been too afraid to reach out, and she had lived with the guilt of leaving me behind every single day. As I listened to her story, I couldn't help but feel a range of emotions: anger, relief, and ultimately, a deep sense of understanding. I knew that I couldn't stay mad at her, not when I had thought she was gone forever. She was the love of my life, and the thought of losing her again was too much to bear. In the end, we decided to start over, to rebuild our relationship from the ground up. It would be a challenge, no doubt, but I was willing to take that leap. As we sat together, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and excitement for what the future held. It was a second chance, a new beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. I still remember the first time I saw Sarah's profile on Tinder. Her bright smile and warm brown eyes drew me in instantly. After a few witty messages back and forth, we decided to meet up for dinner. Conversation flowed easily that night as we discovered we shared so many of the same interests: hiking, live music, and obscure documentaries, to name a few. I left the date feeling optimistic, like maybe I had finally met someone special. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I fell into an exciting routine: walks in the park, movies on the couch, and romantic dinners out on the town. We just couldn't get enough of each other. I savored every new thing I learned about her: how she scrunched her nose when she laughed, her encyclopedic knowledge of world capitals, her secret obsession with 90s boy bands. Everything she did was captivating to me. When we were together, the rest of the world faded away. But as time passed, cracks began to form in the whirlwind fantasy I had built up in my head. Small disagreements turned into lingering, awkward silences. Our lively debates gave way to cruel jabs and subtle criticisms. The things that had seemed so charming at first now irritated me to no end. I started to withdraw, avoiding those piercing texts, asking me where I was or who I was with. The relationship I had been so sure of now felt stifling, like a trap I desperately needed to escape. I knew what I had to do, as painful as it was. One night after dinner, I gently explained that this just wasn't working for me anymore. I told Sarah how much I cared for her, but that I didn't see a real future for us as a couple. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to initiate. I braced myself for the tears and anger I knew were coming, but instead, she just nodded quietly before leaving my apartment without a word. At first, I felt relieved it was over. I missed the excitement of our early days, but not the jealous drama that had come to dominate our time together. I looked forward to focusing on my friends, my hobbies, my job, all the parts of my life that had fallen by the wayside. It wasn't long, though, before the texts started coming. First, just a few probing questions, asking if I was okay or if we could meet up to talk. But when I politely declined, the tone shifted. The messages became accusatory, then abusive. Sarah called me cruel, heartless, a monster. She said I had destroyed her, that she could never trust anyone again. I tried to be understanding at first, knowing she was hurting. But as the barrage continued day after day, I eventually had to block her number just to make it stop. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few days later, I emerged from work to find Sarah waiting by my car. Mascara streaked down her tear-stained face. She begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance. I rushed to my car, ignoring her hysterical cries for me to come back. My hands shook the whole drive home, with her stifled sobs echoing in my mind. That chilling encounter was only the beginning. Sarah started showing up everywhere she knew I would be: the gym, my favorite coffee shop, the grocery store. Even when I varied my routine, she always managed to find me, her presence causing my heart to freeze in my chest. I stopped going out with friends, afraid she might confront me. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, she started targeting my loved ones. A screaming voicemail on my sister's wedding day, a surprise appearance at my nephew's 5th birthday party. The barrage was relentless, leaving myself and my family feeling violated and unsafe. I filed a restraining order, hoping to regain some control. But Sarah's obsessive fury knew no legal bounds. The final straw came when I arrived home from work one evening to see my front door ajar. I cautiously stepped inside to find Sarah sitting calmly on my living room sofa, photo albums and scrawled notes scattered around her. As I ordered her to leave, her eerie composure dissolved into vitriolic rage. She hurled insults and objects in my direction before I managed to get her out and call the police. That invasion of my home left me shaken to my core. I hardly recognized the terrified, paranoid person I had become. Just leaving the house filled me with dread. Loud noises made me jump. I felt constantly on edge, just waiting for Sarah to appear again. I knew I needed help. With therapy and the support of close friends, I've made progress rebuilding my life. I still look over my shoulder in crowds and struggle with anxiety in social situations. But slowly, the good days outnumber the bad. I refuse to let Sarah's toxicity define me. Healing is an ongoing process. The scars may never fully fade, but I'm determined to move forward on my own terms, embracing light and possibility once again. This painful chapter will make me stronger, not fearful. And I will never ignore red flags again, even in the delirium of new romance. My sense of safety may be forever shaken, but I will never allow myself to be someone's victim. Not again. This is my life, and I will not let my power be stolen from me. The darkness will not win. I still vividly remember the day I matched with Emily on Tinder. Her profile intrigued me. Stylish, outgoing, with a warm, contagious smile. We started messaging and really hit it off. The conversation flowed effortlessly for hours, from shared interests to funny stories. She came across as charming, witty, and enthusiastic about life. I was instantly drawn to her magnetic personality. After a week of constant messaging, I worked up the courage to ask Emily out. We planned to meet for coffee. As soon as I walked in and saw her smiling and waving from the corner, any nervousness vanished. The date was even better than imagined. We talked and laughed for hours, lost in our own world. With each minute, I felt myself falling for Emily more. Everything just seemed to click. This kicked off blissful weeks of romantic outings and long calls. Emily never failed to make me smile and gave me butterflies constantly. I started picturing a real future with her. But then things took a turn. We were on a dinner date when I noticed Emily staring at me intently, barely touching her food. She studied my every bite with an unsettling glint in her eyes. I brushed it off, but felt uneasy. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. A car I didn't recognize parked near my apartment in the mornings. The prickly sensation of being watched around town. Emily made oddly specific comments about my routine, my morning jog, route home, weekend chores. I tried ignoring it, but couldn't shake the creeping suspicion I was being followed and monitored. My instincts screamed something wasn't right. The truth was revealed when I found a small GPS tracking device stuck under my car after having drinks with Emily one night. I was absolutely horrified when I realized what it was and that she must have planted it there to spy on me and track my every movement without my knowledge or consent. My hands shook as I carefully removed the device, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief that Emily, the woman I had been dating and cared deeply for over the past few months, would violate my trust and privacy in such a disturbing, unethical way. I immediately called the police to report what I had found. The officers who arrived at my home were very concerned and confiscated the tracking device as evidence. They informed me that GPS tracking without consent is considered stalking and illegal. They promised to fully investigate Emily's actions. Over the next few days, I existed in a constant state of hypervigilance, anxiety, and fear. I scrutinized every face I passed on the street, wondering if Emily was following me. I barely slept, plagued by panic attacks and paranoia. My once strong sense of safety and independence had been completely shattered by Emily's betrayal. The police advised me to avoid all contact with her. I also enrolled in a safety program where police did extra patrols around my home and escorted me on my daily commutes. But none of it could fully ease the psychological damage Emily had inflicted by deceiving me and invading my privacy in such a creepy, dangerous way. After a thorough investigation, the police were able to track down and arrest Emily. When confronted, she freely admitted to meticulously monitoring my movements through an intricate web of surveillance devices and techniques, all part of her twisted plan to control me and force us to be together no matter what. Her disturbing actions resulted in criminal charges for stalking and harassment, and she was sentenced to substantial jail time. But even a guilty verdict could not undo the deep trauma her behavior had caused me. Months later, I'm still struggling to move on and heal. Some days are better than others. With ongoing therapy and support, I'm starting to feel more like myself. But I've become much more cautious, especially with online dating. Deep down, I hope to one day be brave enough to open my heart again. The experience has forced me to face my vulnerabilities. I never imagined someone I connected so strongly with at first could end up harming me so deeply. It shakes your faith in humanity when those you let in betray you so cruelly. I replay events constantly, wondering if I missed red flags. But Emily was a master at manipulation. She took advantage of my openness and desire for love. The police said her fixations had ruined past relationships too. I'm still untangling my jumble of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. With time, I know the sting will fade, but the scars impact how I approach relationships moving forward. Can I learn to trust again fully? Allow someone to truly know the real me. Healing is a roller coaster. Some days, memories and anxiety overwhelm. Other days, hope glimmers through. I know the light will overpower the darkness eventually. Emily hurt me, but she does not define me. For now, I'm appreciating simple joys, cozy nights and quality time with family, laughter with friends. Small steps towards reclaiming myself, towards feeling whole again, towards believing heartbreak won't be the end of this story. My hands shook as I carefully removed the device, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief that Emily, the woman I had been dating and cared deeply for over the past few months, would violate my trust and privacy in such a disturbing, unethical way. I immediately called the police to report what I had found. The officers who arrived at my home were very concerned and confiscated the tracking device as evidence. They informed me that GPS tracking without consent is considered stalking and illegal. They promised to fully investigate Emily's actions. Over the next few days, I existed in a constant state of hypervigilance, anxiety, and fear. I scrutinized every face I passed on the street, wondering if Emily was following me. I barely slept, plagued by panic attacks and paranoia. My once strong sense of safety and independence had been completely shattered by Emily's betrayal. The police advised me to avoid all contact with her. I also enrolled in a safety program where police did extra patrols around my home and escorted me on my daily commutes. But none of it could fully ease the psychological damage Emily had inflicted by deceiving me and invading my privacy in such a creepy, dangerous way. After a thorough investigation, the police were able to track down and arrest Emily. When confronted, she freely admitted to meticulously monitoring my movements through an intricate web of surveillance devices and techniques, all part of her twisted plan to control me and force us to be together no matter what. Her disturbing actions resulted in criminal charges for stalking and harassment, and she was sentenced to substantial jail time. But even a guilty verdict could not undo the deep trauma her behavior had caused me. Months later, I'm still struggling to move on and heal. Some days are better than others. With ongoing therapy and support, I'm starting to feel more like myself. But I've become much more cautious, especially with online dating. Deep down, I hope to one day be brave enough to open my heart again. The experience has forced me to face my vulnerabilities. I never imagined someone I connected so strongly with at first could end up harming me so deeply. It shakes your faith in humanity when those you let in betray you so cruelly. I replay events constantly, wondering if I missed red flags. But Emily was a master at manipulation. She took advantage of my openness and desire for love. The police said her fixations had ruined past relationships too. I'm still untangling my jumble of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. With time, I know the sting will fade, but the scars impact how I approach relationships moving forward. Can I learn to trust again fully? Allow someone to truly know the real me. Healing is a roller coaster. Some days, memories and anxiety overwhelm. Other days, hope glimmers through. I know the light will overpower the darkness eventually. Emily hurt me, but she does not define me. For now, I'm appreciating simple joys, cozy nights and quality time with family, laughter with friends. Small steps towards reclaiming myself, towards feeling whole again, towards believing heartbreak won't be the end of this story. I still vividly remember the wave of excitement that washed over me when I first matched with Alex on Tinder. His photos showed an athletic, ruggedly handsome guy with sparkling blue eyes and an infectious, crooked smile. But it was his witty bio that really caught my attention. It boasted impressive credentials like a PhD in physics from Stanford, a lucrative job at a hot tech startup, and outdoor hobbies like rock climbing, surfing, and playing guitar in an indie band. He seemed almost too good to be true. We immediately hit it off when we started messaging back and forth. Alex had such quick wit and an endearing, self-deprecating charm. We bonded over our shared love of classic sci-fi novels like Doom and Asimov, new wave indie folk bands, and an appreciation for craft beer. I was instantly smitten. When it came time for our first date, Alex suggested meeting at a cozy Italian restaurant near my apartment. I spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready, changing my outfit 5 times before settling on a casual but flattering black dress. My stomach fluttered with excited nerves as I entered the restaurant and spotted Alex waiting at a table, looking just as handsome as his photos. He greeted me with a warm hug and his blue eyes sparkled even brighter in person. Dinner flowed effortlessly. The conversation never hit a lull. Alex regaled me with entertaining stories from his globe-trotting adventures, like scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef, summiting at Kilimanjaro, and hiking the Andes Mountains. I was enthralled by his colorful stories, wondering how one person could fit so much life experience into just a few decades. Yet he also asked thoughtful questions about my life as an elementary school teacher, seeming genuinely interested in understanding my world. I found myself opening up about my passion for inspiring young minds. After lingering for hours over dessert and coffee, Alex suggested continuing the date back at his apartment so he could show me his rare vinyl collection. I hesitated at first, but found myself disarmed by his shy, boyish smile and eagerness to keep the night going. My instincts told me I could trust this kind, charming man. Alex's apartment was stylishly decorated. The walls mounted with vintage guitars and original photography, shelves crammed with science textbooks and sci-fi paperbacks. It all supported the worldly, artistic vibe portrayed in his Tinder profile. As he showed me around, I felt like I was getting a peek into the life of this remarkable Renaissance man. In the cozy moments we shared flipping through his vinyl records and talking effortlessly about our favorite bands, I grew more enthralled. Alex was one of the most interesting people I'd ever met. When he finally walked me home close to 2 a.m., I was giddy. I knew this was the start of something special. In the blissful weeks that followed, Alex and I grew closer. We would picnic in the park, go dancing at indie concerts, hit up museums and bookstores, all the typical dating rituals, yet somehow more magical with him. He planned thoughtful surprises like cooking an elegant candlelit dinner at his place, complete with my favorite wine and fresh flowers. On weekends, we'd escape the city to go hiking or camping under the stars. We even traveled together for a long weekend, exploring some charming mountain town. The more time we spent together, the harder I felt. After a string of lackluster relationships, I was certain I had finally found the one. Alex was the whole package, intelligent yet down to earth, adventurous but also content staying in, romantic and passionate. He was the man I never knew I always wanted. My friends were enamored by how thoughtful and devoted he was. This was by far the healthiest, most secure relationship I'd ever been in. But slowly, subtle peculiarities about Alex started nagging at me. Tiny inconsistencies would surface in his stories, like saying he got his PhD at Stanford when weeks before he said Caltech, or that his sister lived in Denver instead of Portland. Once he made an offhand remark about back when I was playing pro soccer in Europe, which definitely wasn't in his witty Tinder bio. I still remember the excitement I felt in my first match with Aaron on Tinder. His profile picture showed a handsome, athletic guy with warm brown eyes and a kind smile. His bio made him seem funny and down to earth. I felt an instant connection, even just from chatting over the app, and couldn't wait to meet him in person. We planned our first date at a cozy wine bar downtown. I spent way too much time getting ready, making sure my outfit and hair were just right. When I got to the bar and saw Aaron waiting there, my stomach did a little flip. He looked even better than his photos. We hugged hello, and he complimented me right away, putting me instantly at ease. The date was perfect. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and he made me laugh so much my cheeks hurt. I told him all about my job, my family back home, and how I was enjoying living in a new city. He seemed genuinely interested and shared just as much about his own life. I was amazed at how much we had in common. We liked the same podcasts, had the same taste in music, and both loved to travel. By the end of the night, I felt certain that Aaron was someone special. We closed down the bar and lingered outside, neither one wanting the night to end. When we finally said goodbye, he asked if he could see me again, and I immediately said yes. Over the next few weeks, we fell hard and fast. We went on romantic dates to museums, concerts, and took long walks just talking endlessly. Aaron was attentive, affectionate, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. I introduced him to my closest friends, and they all gave their seal of approval, saying how great he was for me. I couldn't believe my luck, finding a sweet, handsome, interesting guy who doted on me and wanted to be with me all the time. But in hindsight, those early days were really the calm before the storm. Looking back now, I can see the subtle red flags I chose to ignore then. How Aaron seemed a little too eager to move things along quickly in the relationship. How I sometimes caught him in small lies to impress me. How he would become irrationally jealous if I mentioned hanging out with other male friends. But at the time, I brushed it all off, not wanting to see any flaws in this man I was so enamored with. Everything changed gradually. At first, it was just Aaron wanting to know where I was all the time, blowing up my phone when I didn't text him back immediately. If I was out with friends, he would call repeatedly, interrogating me about who I was with and when I'd be home. I started turning down invitations, staying in more often to avoid another fight. Soon, the verbal abuse crept in, sarcastic comments about my looks or intelligence. Cutting insults disguised as jokes, especially around other people. If I confronted him, Aaron claimed I was overreacting or being too sensitive. He convinced me the problem wasn't his behavior, but my response to it. So I began walking on eggshells, altering my actions to avoid these hurtful remarks. But it was never enough. Aaron became consumed with controlling every aspect of my life. I had to clear even minor plans with him first and check in throughout the day. He constantly accused me of flirting or cheating if I spoke to another man. He monitored my social media and my text messages. If I pushed back, Aaron's temper would explode, hitting way to frightening tantrums full of ugly name-calling at ear-splitting volume. I lost touch with friends, stopped doing activities I loved, and gave up parts of myself to try to keep Aaron happy. But his irrational jealousy and raging outbursts only worsened over time. I was exhausted, anxious, and felt completely alone. The sweet, caring guy I had fallen for was gone, replaced by an angry, controlling stranger who seemed to take pleasure in chipping away at my self-esteem. Leaving the relationship was terrifying and difficult. Aaron used every manipulation tactic to try to make me stay. When I held my ground, his abusive behaviors escalated even further. But I knew I had to get out for my own safety and well-being. Though it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, I walked away, blocked his number. It made it clear I would never come back. The aftermath was brutal. For months, I suffered crippling panic attacks, nightmares, and flashbacks from the trauma of abuse. But slowly, with help from counselors and support from loved ones, I began to heal. These days, I'm rebuilding my confidence, getting back to the activities and people that bring me joy, and reminding myself that I deserve to be cherished in a relationship. My time with Aaron taught me painful but valuable lessons. Now I trust my gut when something feels off instead of making excuses. I maintain strong connections with family and friends who ground me. And I will never again ignore red flags or compromise my values just to keep a partner happy. Though dating still makes me a bit skittish, I know there are good, caring men out there worthy of my love. And I will never settle for anything less than the compassion, respect, and peace I know I deserve. My experience made me stronger, wiser, and more committed to speaking out, so other women in unhealthy relationships know they aren't alone. Leaving was the hardest yet best decision I ever made. There is life, light, and love waiting on the other side of fear. I still remember the excitement I felt when I first matched with Mark on Tinder. His profile picture showed a handsome, smiling face that instantly drew me in. He seemed warm, friendly, and genuine, not like some of the other guys on the app who were clearly only interested in hookups. When Mark and I started messaging, the conversation flowed so naturally. He was easy to talk to and made me laugh with his quick wit and goofy sense of humor. I couldn't wait to meet him in person. Our first date was at a cozy Italian restaurant that Mark had suggested. As soon as I walked in and saw him waiting there, I felt butterflies in my stomach. He looked just as cute in real life as he did in his pictures. We ended up talking for hours about everything under the sun. Our jobs, our families, movies we liked, places we traveled. Mark told me about his passion for hiking and landscape photography, showing me some of the breathtaking pictures he had taken on his trips. I found myself eager to keep the conversation going, not wanting the night to end. After dinner, we went for a romantic stroll through a nearby park. Walking under the stars, I realized that Mark was reaching out to hold my hand. My heart leaped as our fingers intertwined. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt such an instant connection on a first date. Mark seemed totally into me too, making plans for our second date before we even said goodbye. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I fell hard and fast for each other. We went on hiking dates, museum dates, beach dates. He always planned the most creative and thoughtful outings. He even cooked me romantic dinners at his place with candles, wine, and delicious food he had cooked himself. Mark made me feel so special, like I was the only girl in the world. When I was with him, nothing else mattered. I found myself daydreaming about him throughout my workday, counting down the minutes until I could see him again. It wasn't long before Mark and I slept together for the first time. With him, it felt natural, right? Not at all like the awkward one-night stands I've had with other guys from dating apps. He held me all night afterward, both of us content in each other's arms. I truly felt like Mark and I had something meaningful to start our real relationship. But then, after a couple months of pure bliss, something changed. Mark became distant, harder to pin down for dates. His texts dwindled until he ghosted me altogether, leaving me confused and heartbroken. I agonized over what had gone wrong, missing him terribly and wishing we could go back to the way things were early on. In the following weeks, I nearly drove myself crazy wondering if I should reach out to Mark again. Even though he had hurt me and a part of me hoped it had all been some misunderstanding, that he would apologize and we could make it work. I was still half hoping for a reconciliation when I saw that fateful social media post months later. It was a photo of Mark with his arm around a pretty brunette, captioned, "Happy 5-year anniversary to the love of my life." I stared at my phone screen, dumbfounded and nauseous. After all this time, after I had let myself fall for him so completely, Mark had been in a long-term relationship. He had used Tinder to cheat while keeping me as his dirty little secret on the side. The realization crushed me. I thought back through our whole relationship, wondering if there had been signs I overlooked in my rose-colored infatuation. I tried to recall if Mark had ever mentioned being single, or if he had skillfully dodged those types of personal questions. How could I not have realized I was being played? In hindsight, it was stupid of me to assume that a connection formed on a dating app could be trusted so quickly. I had leaked before looking and given my heart to someone who didn't deserve it or truly care about me. Mark's betrayal left scars that made me hesitant to put myself out there again. I became much more guarded when chatting with new matches, keeping them at arm's length until I was sure of their intentions. My experience with Mark was a painful but valuable lesson. It taught me to listen to my instincts and be wary when something seems too good to be true. Opening yourself up to find love also means making yourself vulnerable to hurt. I won't let my heart be so easily deceived again, but I also can't close myself off from taking a chance. One day, when I'm ready, I hope to find someone real, someone who will love me honestly in the light of day, not just in the shadows. Sitting at home on that rainy Saturday night, I was bored and looking for a little excitement. On a whim, I decided to download Tinder to see if I could meet someone new. As I swiped through profiles, one guy immediately caught my eye. His name was Alex. He was 28 and his photos showed him hiking, lounging on the beach with friends, and dressed up for a wedding. He seemed outgoing, adventurous, and had a warm, genuine smile. We instantly matched and started chatting. Alex was so easy to talk to over messaging. We discovered we both loved traveling, trying new restaurants, and going to concerts. He was funny too, always making cute jokes that would make me laugh out loud to myself. I felt like I could really be myself around him. After a couple weeks of non-stop messaging, we exchanged numbers and started texting daily from morning to night. The conversations never got dull. When Alex finally asked me out on a real date, I was thrilled. We met up at a local brewery, which instantly impressed me that he chose something trendy I had been wanting to try. In person, he was even more charming and attractive than his pictures. The date flew by as we lost track of time chatting comfortably. I found myself really smitten with Alex and how interested he seemed in everything about me. We started dating exclusively right after that. We would go out to dinner, concerts in the park, museums, beaches, you name it. Hanging out together was always the highlight of my week. Things were moving fast, but it just felt so easy and natural with Alex. He showered me with compliments and little gifts, which made me feel so special. I really thought I hit the jackpot finding this guy. About a month into dating Alex, he started opening up to me about his financial struggles for the first time. He told me between his student loan payments, high rent and car payment, money had gotten really tight for him lately. He said he was barely scraping by each month after paying all his bills. Then Alex mentioned he needed to take his cat to the vet because she was sick, but he couldn't afford the vet bill right now. He said he felt so guilty that he couldn't properly take care of his cat. My heart just broke for him. I'm a huge animal lover too, so I really felt for what he was going through. I offered to lend him the money for the vet bill and told him he could just pay me back whenever he was able. Alex was so grateful. He gave me a big hug and promised he would pay me back the money on his next payday without fail. A week later, though, Alex told me he needed help again. This time he said his car was making some weird noises and he took it into the mechanic who said it needed some expensive transmission repairs. Alex said he had no idea how he was going to afford this repair on top of his other bills. Even though he hadn't paid me back the previous loan yet, I felt bad and decided to lend him the money for the car repair too. Alex again promised to pay me back as soon as possible. This pattern continued over the next several months. Alex always had some emergency financial need, whether it was medical bills, car repairs, issues with his apartment, etc. He would give a very convincing sob story every time, so I kept feeling awful for him and lending him money, but the repayments never seemed to come. Eventually, I started to get frustrated. I gently brought up the money he owed me, but Alex would dodge the topic or make me feel guilty, saying I didn't trust him. I let it go, not wanting to ruin the relationship over money when he was going through such a hard time. But the requests for loans kept coming, now with bigger dollar amounts. One night at dinner, when Alex brought up needing to borrow a large sum for rent, I finally snapped. Something didn't feel right. How could he always have such conveniently timed emergencies? Why didn't he ever repay me? My frustration spilled out as I accused him of just using me for money. Alex blew up into a defensive rage unlike I ever seen, calling me heartless for not helping him in his time of need. It finally clicked that this guy had been playing me all along. There was no money trouble, just manipulation tactics to skim cash out of me. I felt like such a fool for falling for his sob stories and draining my bank account trying to help someone who had no intention of ever paying me back. I immediately cut ties with Alex despite his desperate apologies and attempts to make me feel guilty. In hindsight, there were red flags from the start that I ignored. What kind of stable, genuine guy asks random women he meets online for money? But I was so blinded by my strong feelings for Alex that I tossed logic aside. This experience definitely left me shaken and embarrassed, but it taught me invaluable lessons. Don't hand money over to anyone you don't know well. Follow your instincts, and don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Although swiping right led me to getting scammed this time, in the future I'll enter any online dating situation with far more caution, wisdom, and boundaries. My silly days of believing any hard luck story are certainly behind me. Matching with Chandler on Tinder seemed so promising at first. His profile caught my eye right away. The picture showed a cute guy with sparkling blue eyes, dimpled cheeks, and a smile that radiated warmth. Reading through his bio, we appeared to have a ton in common. We liked the same podcasts, indie movies, hiking trails, and dreamed of traveling to Tokyo and Oslo. I gleefully swiped right, waiting in anticipation to see if we would match. My heart did a little flip when I opened Tinder to find we had matched. Chandler initiated the conversation, complimenting the art photos I had posted and asking about my photography. We ended up chatting for hours, the messages flowing effortlessly. He came across as kind, thoughtful, and a little quirky in a charming way. After a week or so of nonstop texting morning and night, Chandler finally asked me out on a real date. We decided to meet at a new modern fusion restaurant downtown that had great reviews. I spent almost as much time choosing my outfit as I did getting ready for prom. I wanted to look perfect, but not like I was trying too hard. Despite my nerves, the evening could not have gone better. Chandler looked just as handsome in person as in his pictures. We talked nonstop over dinner about work, family, pop culture, childhood memories. The time flew by quickly and comfortably. Chandler insisted on paying the entire bill, dismissing my offer to split. After dinner, he suggested going for a stroll through the park across the street. As we walked side by side under the moonlight, he tentatively reached out and took my hand in his. I felt butterflies erupt in my stomach and couldn't stop smiling. We sat by the fountain talking for another hour until he reluctantly said he should probably get home. Chandler asked if he could see me again soon for a second date, and I eagerly said yes. Over the next few weeks, Chandler planned several creative date ideas, a visit to the new art museum downtown, trying an intense spinning class together, and a romantic homemade dinner at his apartment where he cooked my favorite meal. Things were going amazingly well. We just clicked emotionally and intellectually. I found myself daydreaming about Chandler throughout my long work days, counting down the minutes until I could see him again. For the first time in years, I felt that spark, the exhilaration of a new relationship full of potential. But after about a month of dating, Chandler started to change. At first it was subtle, a snippy comment I'll be chatting with a barista at my favorite coffee shop, or glancing at my phone notifications too long while we were hanging out. But soon his mild jealousy turned into full-blown paranoia about me cheating. No matter how much affection I showed Chandler, he was convinced I had eyes for someone else. The accusatory, suspicious comments came more frequently. If I was even 5 minutes late meeting up with him, Chandler would work himself into a frenzy, demanding to know who I was with. He would seize my phone to scroll through my text messages and photos, interrogating me about anyone male he found in my contacts or pics, certain I was hiding some illicit flirtation or affair. I started changing my behaviors to avoid angering Chandler, turning down invites from my guy friends to avoid conflict. But it was never enough. Soon, the allegations of cheating came almost daily over the slightest perceived offenses. Taking too long to text back, looking in another man's direction, or wearing a cute outfit to work. One night, when I was 20 minutes late to dinner, Chandler lost it. He accused me of being with another man, refusing to hear my real reason, waiting on an urgent work call. The more I defended myself, the more convinced he became I was lying to cover my tracks. He made a huge scene in the restaurant, storming out and leaving me humiliated and in tears. A few weeks later was the last straw. I woke up and found Chandler rifling through my bedroom drawers, flipping through my photo albums and old letters. He claimed he was looking for a t-shirt, but I knew he was digging for some kind of proof I was unfaithful. I felt violated, not just by the search of my things, but by the complete erosion of trust. Despite Chandler's pleas and promises to change, I ended things right then and there. His jealous, erratic behavior showed no signs of getting better. As difficult as it was, I knew the relationship could not continue without mutual trust and respect. I cared deeply for Chandler, but had to prioritize my own mental health and happiness. After I blocked Chandler's number, the fog of the relationship lifted. Friends pointed out just how controlling he had become, making me question myself and twisted in knots to avoid his irrational anger. I dodged a bullet, ending it before things got even worse. Though it took time to bounce back, I healed by diving into work, hobbies, and spending more time on my close friendships. A few months later, I decided to dip my toes into dating again via Tinder. The experience with Chandler left me wary but also better equipped to spot red flags early on. I knew the right guy was still out there, someone who could love me in a healthy way. And I would never again abandon my self-worth just to be with someone. My own needs mattered too. With a mix of caution and optimism, I swiped into a new dating adventure, one hopefully with less drama and more joy. Tinder had given me a thrilling high and a painful low, but I still had hope I would one day find my perfect match.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.